I know you've said that we live in sort of an apocalyptic time, that this is an apocalyptic time.
Yeah.
Now, when people hear that, they probably think that you mean volcanoes are erupting all the time,
Right.
the sky is turning red.
Yeah.
But what do you mean by that, and how is this an apocalyptic time?
Yeah. Well, in the broad sweep, we have a number of apocalypses that occur throughout the scriptures. There are world systems and world orders that are established. They last for a time. They get corrupted. God judges them. They disappear, and then a new order emerges from that. And I think one of the simple ways to see this is to look at the different transformations of the sanctuary through the Old Testament. The tabernacle was built at the foot of Sinai, and for several hundred years, the tabernacle is the center of Israel's worship and life. But then, in the early chapters of Samuel, the Philistines invade. They capture the ark. The tabernacle is dismantled, and the tabernacle is never put back together again. You'd think if when the ark comes back to Israel that they stick it back in the most holy place and start up things again, but that doesn't happen. And instead you have about 100-year period between the end of the period of the Judges and Solomon's reign, when there is no single sanctuary. You're back in the period before the tabernacle was built. And when something is rebuilt, it's not the same thing. So there's an apocalyptic moment happening with, the end of a world happens in the early chapters of Samuel. And then there's a different world, a different liturgical world, continuity with the old. I mean, the temple isn't a brand new kind of sanctuary, but it has significant differences from what the tabernacle was. And so there's that's kind of transformation you see regularly in Scripture. And when I say apocalyptic, I think that's what I refer to. We're not at the end, I don't think we're at the end of the world, not at the end of world history, but we're at the end of a world order. And I think about that in a couple of different time frames. I think in some ways you can think back 500 years to the end of the medieval age and the beginning of the modern world with the Reformation and all the associated social and political movements around the Reformation. That world has been ending and is coming to an end in all kinds of ways. I think it's been ending for a century or so. Or you can think more narrowly. America gets established as the global player, the dominant player in the beginning of the 20th century, and especially after the fall of the Soviet Union. And I think that world, the American century, as it were, that is it's just no longer the case. America still has enormous power, but you have different centers of power that are arising. China, there's different economic centers that are rising in other parts of the world that challenge the hegemony of the U.S. But I think the key thing that I look at when I try to think about what's happening is what's happening in the church, because the church is the center of world history. And I think we're in the midst of a major upheaval, that has both positive and negative dimensions to it. The negative dimension is the one we're all familiar with from our experience in the United States, the Western world, the decay of orthodoxy, the decay of Christian morality, the church's embrace of what amounts to paganism in certain sectors. But that's accompanied, at the same time, we've seen this massive shift from the northern to the southern hemisphere. Philip Jenkins details this in The Next Christendom. A lot of missionaries have recognized this for a long time, that the center of gravity of Christianity has already shifted to the southern hemisphere. That's a massive historical event, and that's a sign that the world that we've been assuming for 1,000 years maybe, where Europe is the center of Christianity, then the U.S. is the center of Christianity. That's changing, and we're going to have a world where Nigeria is one of the huge Christian countries in the world, or Brazil is one of the huge Christian countries in the world. That's a great thing. That's a fruit of mission. It's a gift of the Spirit, but it does mean that the world is shifting and changing. It's not the same. We're not in the same world that we've been accustomed to in the West. So that's the kind of moment. And when I talk about the apocalyptic, I'm talking about the fraying of Christian civilization in the West. But I think it's important to see that that's part of this global movement that is not entirely a disaster. I mean, there's epical changes going on, but some of those are things that we really should be thankful for.